Hello, everybody. Welcome to the world of Formula One with myself and, of course, Delucia Daniels. By my estimation, Delucia, I feel that there are only two other drivers who could potentially upset the Mercedes apple cart of George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. And I think those two drivers are Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton.
Absolutely. And do you know what? I think with the upgrades that Red Bull brought this weekend, it's quite clear to see that they have come out of their slump and really have been way more competitive to how we've seen them in the beginning of the year. I mean, Max Verstappen's best finish this time round, second place at Austria, track that he is very, very good at. And I feel like this weekend kind of cemented you can never rule out Max Verstappen. We know this already, but seeing him fight the way that he did, it was just so, so incredible. I enjoyed every single moment of that race, to be honest with you. But had Red Bull put it him 2 or 3 laps earlier, I think he would have gone for George, because there was a lot of power in that Red Bull. And I feel like if it was just a little bit earlier, absolutely it would have been Max's win. It should have.
Yeah, I must say, I was confused by a couple of things yesterday, and we'll go through them. But let's start with Max Verstappen. And I went, if they pit, I said, I was with a whole bunch of people, and I said, listen, if Mercedes pit, Max has got to pit immediately. They cannot go out there. The offset in the tire was just too much. It was, a second, anything between 7/10 and a second per lap with the new tire. And I said, geez, after 2 laps, I was like, come on, guys, you got to come in. And I thought maybe after 3, okay, there's a chance. But when they left him out for 6 laps, I just went, this is just too much of a mountain to climb, and George will be able to control the pace. As much as George, the gap at the end was only 1.6 seconds, I think George had a lot in hand that he would have been able to defend against Max for 2 laps at least. But if there were 10 laps left, all of a sudden, I think there would have been a different kind of a race. It was a problematic, but actually very encouraging weekend for Max Verstappen. He had the big off in qualifying. Number one, he was very lucky to get into Q3. Number two, he was very unlucky to crash out in Q3. These things happen. And then in the race, brilliant drive from him. And then I think Hannah Schmitz got it wrong for a very seldom time that happens in her life. But I think Red Bull missed a trick yesterday.
They absolutely did. And I think, you put it so plainly where, you are competing with the likes of both Mercedes at that point. And you also had at one stint Hamilton versus Verstappen. I mean, can we talk about the drone shots for a second? They were phenomenal.
Wow.
I mean, I was also tilting my head a bit, so maybe those with vertigo didn't enjoy it as much. But I really love the drone shots. It also just reminded us that the sport is just incredible. The fact that those drones can follow at over 300 kilometers per hour is incredible. But, when you're looking at a race that is so competitive, because if you think about it, Sash, towards the end, it could have been George, Kimi, or Verstappen that could have won that race at the end if they had gone and pitted Max a lot sooner. But at the same time, you also had someone like Kimi Antonelli, who also pitting 1 lap before both safety cars.
Yeah.
I mean, the chances of that happening and the unluckiness of that entire situation, and also with happening qualifying with him and mistaking the yellow for double yellows, that entire situation was just unlucky for Kimi. So at the end of the day, George Russell really did, get over a good thing. He said that he had to remind himself that he can do this. And when you are competing and being hunted by Verstappen, and you know that your teammate is just, literally right behind him, it makes it all the more satisfying for you to come in and say, all right, I'm only now 40 points away from Kimi in the championship. And that's when things are really going to heat up, because next time out, in just a couple of days' time, we're back in George's hometown. We're back in England.
Yes, and I must say, I think there's going to be an Italian that's going to upset the English party over there. Kimi Antonelli over this weekend, and I think he got desperately unlucky. The crash of Max Verstappen, yes, was it a yellow? Was it a single yellow? If is Formula One backwards, don't forget. So there's always ifs and buts all over the place. However, Antonelli was by far the quickest driver throughout the whole weekend. And in race pace, It was incredible how much quicker he was than his own teammate George Russell and, of course, Max Verstappen. But Red Bull will be very buoyed by the pace that they've found. Hadjar was also not far off Max Verstappen's lap time. So Red Bull's upgrades definitely work for them. Antonelli, he's just going to have to write off these past 2 weekends, Barcelona with an engine failure, and this one with desperate. I hate the word luck in motorsport, but there is no other term. He just was desperately unlucky with everything not going his way, considering he was the fastest man throughout the weekend. Hadjar, I think, did a great job for Red Bull. And let's go and talk a little bit about Ferrari with their new Aduo system and engine performance. Charles Leclerc, I think, got his setup completely wrong. From the first lap, he was nowhere on the pace. Lewis Hamilton looked incredibly racy. And then they put him on soft tires in the middle stint and got him out in traffic. It didn't make any sense to me. Either they were anticipating another virtual safety car or a safety car. That's the only way that I can think about it. But it made no sense putting him on the soft tire and knowing that he was going to come out in the traffic that he encountered. Didn't make sense to me.
Do you know what was the most puzzling for me is when we looked at qualifying, for example, there was a lot of pace in the Ferraris. And, you really saw them kind of, swapping positions along with the Mercedes, the Red Bull, Max Verstappen. You kind of saw them be competitive. And in the race, it was completely different. We saw a bit of Lewis Hamilton having that edge with Verstappen, but Charles was nowhere. Even when he had the little incident with Piastri, even before then, it was still, you're racing on your own, you're in no man's land. And it was quite disappointing because, we had a lot of expectations for Ferrari after their win last time out in Barcelona. We saw how fast Hamilton was, and it just didn't come to fruition in this race. I think that's really just been disappointing because we were really looking forward to seeing if they were going to be able to compete even more now, and it just wasn't there for them. I think with Charles Leclerc as well, it's so interesting for me that it feels like, I don't know if Charles is just getting, if it's the frustration of what's been happening with the Ferraris. Is it, Lewis finally finding his edge and Charles just not gelling with this new car? I don't know what it is, but we're kind of seeing Charles kind of slip by the wayside. And they've now also eaten into points where they could have, gained quite a bit this weekend because Mercedes is now almost 100 points ahead of Ferrari in the championship battle for the constructors title. And it doesn't seem like their upgrades and what they brought to the specific track has worked for them in the way that they thought they would. But yeah, they had no answers to any of their issues that they could respond to. And Fred Vasseur was very mute in his response after the race, saying, this is not a strategy issue, which is so funny because even though they were trying to take advantage with Hamilton, with being under the VSC, they chose the wrong tires. No one else was going for softs. They had a medium option. They still had an extra set of hards. They could have gone any direction, but they went for the softs to offset. And I didn't really understand that strategy at all. But do you know what? He's still sitting third. He's only 6 points behind Kimi Antonelli at this point. So it's still all open, and it's interesting. But I don't think Ferrari just had any answers to any of the other competitors that they were racing against.
Yeah, as I say, I think Lewis had the right setup. He was actually quick. He wasn't that far off George Russell in that first stint. They were going, but Charles Leclerc, whatever setup he chose, definitely didn't work for him. And the other thing with Ferrari, yes, the Lewis Hamilton soft tire didn't make a lot of sense. But do me a favor. They're both hunting down, or Piastri's just taken Charles Leclerc. Lewis is right behind him. Surely you get on the radio and you say to Charles, let Lewis pass. You know that he's on a quicker tire. Meantime, he's stuck with him behind another lap on those soft tires, which we know go off very, very quickly and didn't have any other chance. And I just went, bizarre. Just, your team is just not thinking. Now, before we get onto McLaren, I just want to talk a little bit about the unbelievable racing between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. 3-4 years ago, these two would be hitting wheels. And that's how it was. It just was, they both are extremely brilliant racing drivers, but they wouldn't give each other an inch. Whereas Austria, yes, you're still not going to give an inch, but you'll give maybe half an inch. But it was some brilliant driving from both of them, some great overtakes with each other, some very respectful racing, and world-class racing between the two of them. It was a pleasure to watch.
It was just so reminiscent of 2021. And I think you just have a new appreciation for it where both of them realize that, we're both world champions and we're both aggressive, but intentional with our racing. And you could see that with every corner that they were taking. And I love the fact that, yes, what happened years ago happened. We can move on from that now because we can appreciate it for what it is, in the sense that these are just two guys who just love racing and who happen to be incredibly good at it and very talented. And we have to appreciate it for what it is, because even if you compare it to other racing that we saw in the race as well, and in previous races, Kimi, George, the aggressiveness is there, but it's now just about the precision of that aggressiveness. And I think this is a nice little, everyone can look back at this and be like, this is what racing is about, and to remind us all that the sport is so cool. It's just such a cool sport. And I think, just like I said, the drone shots, 10 out of 10. The camera work was fantastic, and I can't wait to see more of that as we go on to the other circuits, because we just ended only around 8. I feel like it's crazy to say we're only on round 8. It's been a weirdly long year, but also we've had to exercise a lot of patience in between with all of these different shuffles and the race circuits. The race is not happening. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how more of this is going to evolve and how competitive it's going to be, because the another person, we're going to go to McLaren now, but another person who's also collecting points that we're not recognizing is Oscar Piastri. He's
Mm-hmm.
been someone who has quietly been picking up points race after race. He ended fourth yesterday. And with how Oscar is, he's currently sitting fourth in the standings, ahead of Max Verstappen. So I don't want to rule out Oscar just yet for the title, but I feel like maybe if McLaren has some more juice in the engine, they can also just come into the fort.
Yeah, I think this is where we get to McLaren in race pace, and specifically from mid race. They're exceptionally fast, but it seems to be under heavy fuel load. They've got to do a lot of TS tire saving, because I think they just generate too much heat into the tires. So that, I think, is where their actual issue is at the moment. But from mid distance of the race, I mean, Piastri was as quick as anybody else. It wasn't a great day for Lando. There we go. He'll be the first to sit and say, you know what, things just didn't go his way. End of story. That's how it is. But McLaren as a team, definitely making some progress. They've just got to try and figure out a little bit of setup in terms of their heavy fuel load. And then I think they will be able to get there. But Piastri, superb yesterday, picked up the points, as you said, just quietly getting on with his business. Max the same, quietly getting on with his business. Still a fortune of points behind Kimi Antonelli and the likes of George Russell. But from what I saw yesterday, it's definitely Red Bull that you've got to watch out for, and not so much Ferrari or McLaren going forward.
Yeah, and I think that Red Bull is probably just very chuffed with themselves that they've been able to make the progress that they've been able to from the beginning of the year. Isaac Casual wasn't too happy with his performance, but I think with the way he ended, it was better than most. And also, I
Mm-hmm.
think that where Red Bull is going into Silverstone, it's a completely different track as well. It's completely different conditions. Europe is still in the middle of a heat wave. So how is that going to affect, the strategies this weekend coming in to this massive Grand Prix? Verstappen, not too confident, actually. Going into Silverstone, he said he actually doesn't know how it's going to go. Maybe this was an anomaly in Austria with how they performed. And when he was on the simulator working out, let's try and see how Silverstone's going to be, he said that trying to figure out when to deploy the battery, how to harvest the power, he said that was an entirely different ball game in its own. And he said that he actually thinks the Red Bulls are going to struggle, but maybe he's just adding some spice and making sure that everyone else around him doesn't see them as much as a threat, because we do know that Red Bull have the most powerful power unit in their Ford engine. But I don't know. I have a feeling that Max Verstappen will pull something out of the bag this weekend.
Listen, Max is Max, and we know that he does usually call it as it is. He's not one of those who likes to defer away from honesty. But the difference is now we're going to a track that is incredibly power intensive, has got hugely long straights, And now we're going to have a problem with this deployment, as we saw in the likes of Japan, as we saw in the likes of Melbourne, where all of a sudden these cars are meant to be going flat out and they're not going to have power, or they're going to have to coast down half of the straight, and then they're going to have some kind of power. It's going to be a very, very peculiar race to watch as an analyst, and it'll be very interesting post Silverstone to hear what the crowd has to say about these cars seem to be going nowhere, but sounding flat out. So this is going to be a completely different ball game to Barcelona, to Monaco, and to Austria. This is going to test this 50-50 split, and who can figure out how to deploy the battery at the right time. Whereas they might just be following each other until they till a corner. I don't know. I really don't know what to expect this weekend.
I know, me as well. And I think that if you compare it to, how we started the season, the teams that really did do the most and maximize that kind of environment was Mercedes. And Toto Wolff has been very passive in saying, we're not bringing any upgrades yet. Everybody else has brought in 8, 9 upgrades every weekend, trying to improve their car. Mercedes, yes, they brought some stuff in Canada, but not too much. Now they're just patiently waiting to see what happens. And I think Silverstone is going to be one of those tracks where I do expect George and Kimi to thrive. Those are the two that I really think are going to be absolutely incredible. It just suits their car a lot more. I think they understand it a lot better with how the deployment works. But at the same time, if I look at everybody else and who does do well in the straights, we know that the top speeds have always belonged to someone like an Alpine. Can Alpine do something magical? We know Nico Hulkenberg had his surprise podium last year. Yes, there was a lot of rain and there was so much chaos going on in the race. But can Alpine get another podium this weekend? Because they didn't do that well this weekend, but I feel like with how their car is, they might do some well in this kind of setup. We're also looking at the likes of maybe, Verstappen. We always know he's going to be there. Can Lando do anything? He was our winner last year. Can he do anything in his McLaren? And, I think that this is also one of those tracks where, yes, we know Mercedes is going to do well, but who else is going to be able to maximize that? Because I think it's going to be very different to what we've seen in the last 3-4 races.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's going to be completely different. Yeah, straight line speed will help, but it's all about battery deployment. It seems as though, as Europe has this incredible heat wave at present, it seems as though it's going to be a dry race at Silverstone. It seems as though it's going to be pretty hot in terms of temperatures, and England summer, don't just look at the base temperature or outside temperature. You got to look at the humidity. Humidity is pretty high when it comes to the UK, and especially Silverstone. So it's going to be a very grueling race for all of these drivers there. And free practice 1, I think, is going to. There's many times we watch free practice 1 and we're basically looking at long runs. I think free practice 1 is going to give us an idea of how these cars are going to deploy themselves. And those times, whoever finishes top of free practice 1, I think is going to have an incredibly strong weekend.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be interesting for us to see. But the one team I always want to celebrate, and I will give credit to them, is Racing Bulls as well. Another double points finish. Incredible work. It's 9th and 10th. I feel like they're also edging closer to that 5th place in the constructors battle against Alpine. I think they're on 44 points. Alpine are on 57. So that battle is definitely intensifying. We saw how good Lawson was in the race, Arvid Lindblad battling it out as well. And I've been very impressed to see how they've also come to the party. They say better late than never. They're there, they're in the race, they're competing in the top 10, they're getting the points that they need to. So they're also a team that I'm looking forward to watching and to see how they also fare when we go to Silverstone.
Yeah, I think with Racing Bulls, it's about consistency. It's week after week that they're putting in something that is incredibly consistent. Whereas teams like Alpine, all of a sudden they're in Q3, then they're not in Q3. Whereas Racing Bulls, and yes, we had only Q3, but they were already in that top 10. Racing Bulls just seem to be, okay, we're here and that's where we are. Whereas teams like Haas, Alpine, Williams, nowhere yet again, unfortunately. But Haas and Alpine are just a little erratic at present,
Mm.
whereas Racing Bulls seem to have whatever progress step that they're on and whatever developments they're doing seems to be working a lot better for them. Just to wrap up, let's talk about the bottom teams. Aston Martin, okay, we know that they're nowhere. Cadillac came with all of these upgrades, were second faster than what they were in Barcelona.
Yeah.
Bottas lasted one lap with massive brake ears and brake issues and brakes on fire. And Perez's car caught on fire. So, wow, I mean, they were superb up until the race.
Yeah, that was the only thing that was lighting up at Cadillac was their cars and not any of the timing on the timesheets. It's bitterly disappointing, but we always say we have to look at it. Have we improved internally? And
Mm.
I feel like they've just gone backwards. Yes, it was incredibly hot in Austria. It was blistering temperatures. I mean, at one point, I think George said that his water system wasn't working, so he was without a drink throughout the whole race. But I think with Cadillac, we saw it also in practice and in qualifying, brakes on fire. That was what
Yeah.
was happening most of the time. So there is fundamental issues that are wrong at Cadillac. We know this already, but how can they bounce back from that? That's the big question. I think more for them than for anyone else because they do have the team to be able to do that. They've got the experience with the drivers, but I just don't think that they are anywhere. It almost feels like it's a hazard to have them on track at the moment. The same way I feel like it's a hazard to have Aston Martin there when they're being lapped not once but twice.
Yeah, Aston Martin are just, there's nothing more to say. I think we over
Mm.
the weeks and months have tried to be defensive towards them and saying, yes, something's going to happen. No, nothing's happening. Even though Alonso said, yes, the car's the best that it's felt, we were going somewhere. I mean, you're 3.5 seconds off the pace. You're nowhere. End of
Yeah.
story. The one team that disappointed me, though, was Audi in the
Mm.
sense that they did so well in Barcelona, and Barcelona gives us an overall understanding of the chassis of the car, and they look good in Barcelona. I expected them to look pretty decent here in Austria, and that car, I mean, just watching Bortoleto and Hulkenberg just trying to hold on to that car. I mean, it was oversteering, then it was understeering, it was all over the place. So yeah, there's a little bit of work to do there. And Williams also, I've run out of adjectives to describe them. I genuinely have no more sympathy. I've given too much time to Williams to say, yes, this is the team, this is the team, and they just flatter to deceive every single weekend.
The saddest part about that is the fact that a team like Audi, for example, brought 7 upgrades to Austria
Mm.
and were not able to collect a single point. We saw them teetering on the edge of that in 11th, 12th, 13th, but it wasn't enough to even be close to being competitive in the top 10. So again, these upgrades for them clearly not working, always attract specific upgrades that they've brought. I think in general, the only team that really did make massive progress this weekend is Red Bull. And
Red
all
Bull.
the other teams need to go back to the drawing board and have to really figure out what it is they need because, like we said before, it's going to be a whole different circuit coming up this weekend, whole different setup. Who's going to be able to absolutely do their best to get into the points? And Audi are only sitting on 2 points at the moment in their standings, and I hope maybe we'll have a miracle happen again. Maybe Bortoleto on the podium, something. But at this point, that's wishful thinking.
Yeah, you know what? This weekend, you know what? It's Lando's home race, Lewis's home race,
Yeah.
George's home race, Bierman's home race, Lindblatt's home race, uh, Albon in a way his home race as well. So I mean, it's all going to be very, very British centric. But I have a funny feeling that either a Dutchman or an Italian is going to spoil the party.